In the early stillness of dawn, the forest lay wrapped in a thick blanket of mist. Pale sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting a soft golden glow across the moss-covered floor. The trees stood tall and silent, their trunks dark with morning dew. Birds hadn't yet begun their songs, and the world seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Beneath this quiet, hidden in the underbrush, something dangerous lurked. Not a predator, but something man-made, cold and forgotten. Half buried in soil and leaves was an old metal trap, its steel jaws rusted but still sharp. It had been set long ago by poachers who no longer came, left behind like a ghost of violence. Years had passed, but the trap remained ready, waiting for a careless step. Twigs covered its edges, and dead leaves clung to the spring, disguising it well enough that even the most cautious animal might not notice. Not until it was too late. A soft crunch of twigs broke the silence as Ash, a young bobcat, emerged from the shadows. His coat was thick and dappled with muted browns and grays, blending perfectly into the landscape. Muscles moved smoothly beneath his fur as he padded forward, his ears perked, his nose twitching. He had been tracking a rabbit since before sunrise, following its faint scent trail through damp ferns and winding roots. Hunger gnawed at his belly, but he moved carefully, his instincts sharp. He paused near a fallen log, his yellow eyes scanning the thicket. Somewhere close, the scent was strongest. The rabbit had passed through here. He crouched low, silently navigating the forest floor, unaware that each step brought him closer to danger. As he moved around a patch of bramble, the trap waited just ahead, invisible beneath a thin layer of debris. Ash's front paw landed squarely on the center of the trap. In an instant, there was a loud snap, followed by a sharp metallic clank that shattered the stillness like thunder. The trap clamped shut around his leg with brutal force, iron teeth sinking into flesh. Ash let out a wild, pained yowl and thrashed violently, trying to pull away. But the trap held firm. His heart raced. Every muscle in his body screamed for escape, but there was none. The bobcat's powerful legs kicked up dirt and leaves as he twisted and writhed, but the more he fought, the deeper the pain grew. Eventually, exhaustion took over. He collapsed onto his side, chest heaving, eyes wide with terror and confusion. His paw throbbed, slick with blood. The forest, so quiet only moments before, now seemed menacing. Shadows danced where sunlight used to be. Birds had taken flight at the sound, and even the insects had gone still. Ash lay in the dirt, trapped not just by steel, but by the cruel randomness of fate. He didn't know who had left the trap, or why. All he knew was that the forest had turned against him, and now he was alone, or so he thought. Time moved slowly for Ash, as he lay trapped in the dirt. The forest around him returned to silence, but it was a different kind of quiet, heavy, tense, and cold. The pain in his leg pulsed steadily, dulling only when he stopped struggling. Each breath he took was shallow and quick. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but even worse was the thirst. His tongue felt dry, and his mouth tasted of iron and fear. The soft rustling of leaves no longer signaled prey or curiosity. It now meant only one thing: vulnerability. Flies buzzed lazily around the wound, and Ash swatted at them weakly with his tail. The sharp scent of his own blood mingled with the earthy smells of moss and bark, a reminder of his helplessness. He no longer had the strength to growl. His ears twitched at every little sound, but there was no help in sight. The forest had always been his home, his hunting ground, his protector. Now it seemed distant, uncaring. Then came the sound, so faint at first it could have been a breeze, but it grew steadily louder, a soft shuffling, like something dragging across dry leaves. Ash lifted his head, his eyes narrowing in the direction of the noise. Between two low bushes, a flash of orange fur appeared, then disappeared. His body tensed, but he couldn't move. The scent was unfamiliar but not threatening. It was a fox, he was sure of it. And she was not walking, she was crawling. Moments later, the shape of a red fox became clear through the brush. Her coat was dusty and thin, and her eyes seemed clouded, blinking slowly with exhaustion. One of her legs dragged behind her, twisted at a painful angle. She made no sound. There was no fear in her movements, only quiet desperation. She stopped just a few feet away from Ash and collapsed into the leaves, her body curling into a trembling ball. Ash started, his pain momentarily forgotten. There was something strange about her, something more than just her injury. She looked like she'd been there for days. Her ribs showed through her fur, and her breathing was labored. She was not caught in a trap like he was, but she was just as trapped. Maybe worse. The forest had not spared her either. It was a rare thing for two predators to lie so close together without conflict. Yet neither made a sound, neither moved toward the other. They were united by something stronger than instincts, by suffering, by the quiet understanding that both were at the mercy of something they couldn't fight. Ash turned his gaze back to the trees. The sun was sinking lower now, casting long shadows over the forest floor. With the light went the warmth, and the night promised cold and danger. Somewhere nearby, owls were waking, and further off, a coyote called. Ash and the fox lay together in silence, side by side in their pain. One trapped in iron, the other trapped in her own failing body. Alone, neither could survive much longer, but the forest wasn't finished with them yet. Something unseen stirred in the distance. Help, or more danger, was on its way. Far above the forest, a quiet buzzing filled the crisp air. A small drone moved steadily through the sky, its camera tilted downward, scanning the tree canopy below. At the controls, miles away in a wooden outpost tucked into the hillside, a forester named Eli sat hunched over a screen. He was old, with weathered hands and deep lines on his face, the kind carved by years spent in wind, rain, and solitude. He had walked these forests since he was young, learning every trail and hollow, every call of bird and rustle of leaves. Now, with his knees stiff, and his hearing not what it once was, he used new tools to protect the land he loved. Eli had grown used to the drone's usual returns, deer moving in herds, a bear now and then, shadows shifting with the wind. But today was different. As the drone passed over a thick grove near the old southern ridge, Something odd appeared on the screen, a flash of movement. He paused the feed and reversed it. There it was again, barely visible through the trees, a shape low to the ground. It didn't move like a deer, it was smaller. Eli adjusted the camera, zooming in. He caught his breath. A bobcat, clearly injured, lay in the leaves. Its body was curled tightly, and something glinted near its leg. Metal. Eli knew that it would shine well. A trap. He sprang into action, grabbing his field kit, first aid supplies, and an old blanket. The forest was no place for hesitation. He locked the drone into hover mode, keeping it focused on the site as a beacon, and rushed out the door. Eli moved with surprising speed down the narrow trails, guided by memory and instinct. The forest felt heavier today, as if holding its breath. When he neared the grove, he slowed, cautious not to scare the animal further. The air smelled faintly of blood and damp earth. Then he saw the bobcat, just as the drone had shown, motionless except for the rise and fall of its chest. The trap gripped its leg tight, and dried blood clung to the fur. But then Eli noticed something else. A few feet away, half hidden beneath a tangle of brush, lay another shape, smaller. He stepped closer and parted the leaves. A red fox, barely alive. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, then closed again. Her ribs showed sharply beneath her fur, and one leg was bent at an unnatural angle. Eli froze. He recognized that face, though it had been years. Long ago, after a wildfire swept through the northern ridge, he had rescued a litter of fox kits. One had a torn ear that never healed straight. This fox had that ear. Against all odds, she had survived in the wild, until now. Eli knelt beside her, overcome by a wave of quiet sorrow and awe. Two animals, injured and alone, found within feet of each other in the vast forest, one caught by cruelty, the other by time and misfortune. He had to act fast. The sun was sinking, and night would bring cold and predators. But he was no longer just a guardian of the forest. He was their only chance. Eli wasted no time. Years of experience had taught him that hesitation in the wild could mean the difference between life and death. He opened his kit and carefully approached the bobcat, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. Ash's golden eyes flickered open, his body tense, despite exhaustion. The pain in his leg must have been unbearable, but he didn't lash out. Something in him seemed to sense that help had arrived, though mistrust still flickered behind his gaze. With practiced hands, Eli slipped a heavy cloth over the bobcat's head to keep him calm. Then, using a pry tool, he worked to release the trap's rusted hinges. The metal resisted at first, groaning as he applied pressure, but finally it gave way with a sharp snap. The jaws sprang open, and Ash let out a low growl of relief. Eli quickly wrapped the injured leg with gauze and eased the animal onto a folded tarp. Ash didn't resist. He was weak, barely conscious, but he was still breathing, and now free. Eli turned his attention to the fox. She hadn't moved since he found her. He placed his hand gently against her chest. The rise and fall of her ribs was faint, but steady. Her eyes fluttered open again, dull but aware. He carefully slid the blanket under her fragile frame and lifted her into his arms. She was lighter than she should have been, all bones and fur. Still, there was life in her yet. The wind began to stir the trees, and distant thunder rolled across the sky. A storm was moving in. The forest, so still just hours ago, now rustled with tension. Eli picked up the tarp, holding the bobcat, slung the blanket with the fox over his shoulder, and started the long walk back to his cabin. Each step was careful, his arms heavy with the fragile weight of wild lives hanging by a thread. The trail twisted through dense underbrush and over slick stones. The sky darkened quickly, clouds churning above the trees. Rain began to fall in soft, cold sheets, soaking Eli's coat and turning the path to mud. Still, he pressed on, focused only on reaching the shelter before the cold seeped into their wounds. At last, the cabin came into view. A simple structure of old wood and stone, nestled against the hill like it had grown there. Inside, the warmth of a fireplace greeted them. Eli laid the fox on a soft mat near the hearth and gently set the bobcat beside her. He worked quickly, checking the bandages, cleaning the wounds, offering water with a dropper, and food soaked in broth. For hours, Eli moved between them, watching, tending, waiting. Ash stirred now and then, his breathing more regular. The fox remained still, but her eyes followed Eli's movements. There was a flicker of something in her gaze. Recognition, perhaps, or simply the will to keep going. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, in the flickering firelight, two wild creatures rested in fragile peace, their lives no longer fading, but slowly finding their way back. Morning broke slowly over the mountains, casting a pale gold light across the wet forest. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and quiet. Mist rose from the damp ground, curling around the trees like smoke. Inside the forester's cabin, the soft crackle of a dying fire filled the silence. The room smelled of pine, old wood, and healing. Ash stirred first. His eyes opened fully, alert and clear for the first time since Eli had found him. His injured leg was still wrapped tightly, but the swelling had gone down. He shifted his weight slowly, testing his strength, then sat up with careful precision. Across the room the fox was still resting, her breath steady, though her movements remained faint. She blinked sleepily, watching as the bobcat stood for the first time in days. They were two predators who, by nature, should have feared or avoided each other. But something had changed in the stillness of their suffering, something unspoken and fragile. Eli watched from a quiet corner of the room. He had barely slept, rising every hour to check their bandages and monitor their breathing. But now he allowed himself a slow breath of relief. The worst had passed. The forest had given them another chance. Over the next few days, the cabin became a place of quiet recovery. Ash regained his strength quickly. His gait was uneven at first, but he walked without collapsing. The fox, though slower to heal, also improved. Her eyes grew brighter, and she no longer flinched when Eli approached. She began eating on her own, favoring soft berries and cooked meat. He laid gently beside her mat. Though her leg would never fully recover, she moved with quiet determination, adjusting to her new balance with resilience. Eli rarely spoke aloud during this time. He had always believed that the forest understood silence best. Instead, he moved with care, his presence calm and steady, never forcing contact. He watched the two animals not as a scientist, but as a guardian, someone entrusted with their stories, however brief their stay might be. He had seen many creatures pass through his woods, but never two so different, brought together by such strange fate. On the 7th day, the door to the cabin stood open. The air was warmer now, the promise of spring settling over the land. Ash stood at the threshold, his gaze fixed on the trees beyond. He turned his head once as if checking the fox behind him. She was there, limping slightly, but walking. Slowly, she stepped beside him. They didn't hesitate. Together they stepped forward and slipped into the undergrowth, disappearing into the wild. Eli stood at the doorway, watching until they were gone. He felt no need to follow. The forest had taken them back, not as victims, but as survivors. The trap that had once meant death had brought about something rare, a shared fate, a bond born in silence, and a story the forest would carry in whispers for years to come.